what is that?
We need everyone to mute themselves.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go over the opportunities we have for public realm improvements in the upcoming MCROWN neighborhood rezoning. And we have with us Chief of Staff Tasha Young for the Majority Leader, Council Majority Leader Lori Cumbo, who will make a presentation of suggestions that we've discussed over the past several months, and she's gone through the trouble of documenting them with pictures and addresses and fully blown stated recommendations and suggestions. So then after that, we should be able to hear from Richard Barak of the Borough President's Office with some additional suggestions that we can all revisit in October. Okay, so with that, I'll ask Ms. Young to proceed.
Wait. I'm trying to get her the ball. Give me a second.
Well, I can say good evening to everybody. On behalf of Majority Leader Lori Cumbo, I hope everyone's doing well. I hope your families are well in these times that we're living in of uncertainty. And it's good to see everyone's face.
So
I'm trying. Give me a second.
We're here. So basically, just going back to a letter that Ms. Young did back in May, the basics are opportunities for development of city-owned properties, including new affordable housing, opportunities for improving open space and public realm features, economic development, workforce development, schools and other community facilities, sanitation and quality of life issues, and transportation. So that's just working from the letter, but we've got a beautiful.
I don't know how to give you the ball now.
We have a beautiful presentation that you all received by email. Am I correct? Did everybody get it? They can't respond. I hope everybody got it. So.
Wait, I'm trying. Do you have the ball? I think you have it.
Okay, let me try to share my screen. No, I don't have the ball yet.
Oh, you have it. It says you have it.
Okay, I'll try again. So that means that I should be able to share my screen, right?
Correct.
Yes.
I'm not able to do that.
Wait. Okay.
Oh, now I do.
Okay, fabulous.
All right. So are you all seeing the first page of a PowerPoint? It says MCROWN opportunities for public realm improvements. Yes? Okay, good. So again, thank you, Ethel, for the introduction. The Majority Leader was very interested in our office doing a little research along with Council Land Use on what other rezonings have done in successful rezonings in the city. So we borrowed a few highlights from different rezonings in both the Bronx and Manhattan, and kind of glommed out what we think could be applicable for MCROWN. So on to the next slide. It's just a little bit of, what happens when we do a rezone. For those that don't know, like I did this presentation for staff and they were very happy to learn about like how all of this stuff really works. So just the zoning itself controls use and bulk of new buildings. This is old hat for all of you. Housing, stores and offices, industrial community facilities. So the city-led neighborhood rezonings open the opportunity for a more holistic neighborhood planning. They will give us the opportunity to look at open space, to look at economic and workforce development, of course, affordable housing, opportunities for public beneficial development on public land, schools, transportation, sanitation, as was just stated by Ethel. So since 2016, the city tracks neighborhood planning commitments and implementation annually on the website, which is where we got a lot of this information from. Then we just take a look at the surrounding areas to the MCROWN zone. So you see MCROWN in the middle here, which is outlined by the black line. And then we identified publicly owned spaces, publicly owned buildings that are surrounding the MCROWN area that the improvement. So the first thing that we looked at were streets and sidewalks, which form the largest area of public land and present diverse opportunities. So this example is what Atlantic Avenue can look like with the redesign of the median. So we see both Atlantic Avenue today and then an example of Allen Street on the Lower East Side. So the median is expanded, the street is condensed a little bit for motor traffic, but pedestrian traffic would have more use of Atlantic Avenue in the median, and we could put some greenery there and some other more attractive uses on Atlantic Avenue. Another example would be Lowry Triangle. So it's the block of Underhill Avenue. It could be closed to expand into a useful small park or playground. So you have a visual example and then just a triangle diagram of the area that we're talking about. We have a park like this very close to the office in Fort Greene called Betty Carter Park. So it would be the same idea further down on Atlantic Avenue. Park or a small or a playground. So another type of public land offer opportunity for development of community uses would be at the Armory. So we all Armory on Atlantic at Bedford Avenue, and that is currently a men's shelter. It has been a men's shelter, but there is the whole open space building behind it that we can look at ways to, one, make it more attractive over there. It's not a very attractive facility to visit or walk through, but it's a potential, since it is publicly owned, to reimagine what that building is, what it looks like. There are restrictions because it is the use is of an emergency facility in the event we have any kind of disaster, or we need to use that building to lodge people who have been displaced. So although it's an open area, it cannot be outfitted too much because we would have to break that down in the event people would have to be housed there. But what can potentially be there, again, this is going to take a lot of imagination and some significant resources, would be perhaps an art exhibit area, because exhibits can be put up and broken down, perhaps music studio space, dance studio space. There's a few cultural uses that might be able to be housed there in that part of the building that's underutilized or not utilized at all. So other types of public land offer opportunity for development of community beneficial uses, such as affordable housing combined with education or art space. So this is, and I'm sorry, my little square blocks some of my presentation area. That's why I'm half a page at a time. I can't read it. But the example here would be the DOE space on Prospect Alternate Learning Center, 178 Brooklyn Avenue. So this is an existing space that is underutilized by DOE. In the immediate, Ethel had mentioned that this could be additional space for schools now in the age of COVID that need to find more space so the students can social distance properly. But in the long run, this could be a number of things. This could be, housing could go above this potentially. And anything really that the community would like to discuss, it could probably be discussed at this point on how to best utilize this DOE property. So another type of public land opportunity for development of community beneficial uses would be economic development. So here we have the MTA owned properties and land on Atlantic and Franklin. And this can again be within the study, we can discuss what ways the city can utilize these properties in a way that benefits the community. The DCP has agreed to bring in, the other city agencies to have these discussions. So this would be a discussion with the MTA. More MTA land. Now this particular space here reminds me of the area in Lower Manhattan around the meatpacking district, the Gansevoort, where it's like the elevated garden and like bike lanes and things like that are above ground from old shuttle tracks. So this is something that can also be imagined for the tracks that are here at Franklin and St. Mark's. Green space, gardening, just public use above ground, like other areas in the city. And here at PS3 and Hancock Playground, we have more DOE property that again could be on the table to be improved, to be renovated, to be activated into a better use of this space for public realm improvements.
Bless you.
God bless you.
Sorry.
So
Thank you.
here we start talking about another city agency, HPD, which I've really been keeping my eye on with these current budget cuts. But another type of community access is existing affordable housing. So in prior neighborhood studies, HPD has provided analysis of the housing stock in the area and committed to focus existing preservation programs and pilot new ones. So it's a little small, perhaps you can or cannot read it, but these are just some examples of housing commitments that have been made in prior zonings through HPD and HRA that we can also look to approach HPD about. One that's particularly important to the majority leader is the senior housing at Bergen and Dean, which is within the MCROWN zone. But there are other opportunities potentially that we can preserve existing affordable housing and maybe definitely identify new affordable housing that would go up in the MCROWN zone. And really doing a deep dive with HPD. Right now with the budgets, I would suggest that the community boards be a bit insistent to have attention from the agencies, because everyone's going to be really grappling with budget. Another agency that could potentially be brought in because of all the industrialized and commercial presence on Atlantic Avenue is SBS. From the Jerome Avenue rezoning, they really did some creative planning around relocating some of the industry that was on Jerome Avenue to make room for residential and to make room for different kinds of commercial use. So knowing that how important commercial uses are to MCROWN, SBS is another partner that the community board would like to liaise with as part of this study. on what that would look like if we were to be able to move, some of the auto body shops, some of the storage facilities, through partnership with SBS, whether it's a grant program or a number of different things that we saw being done uptown. So we wanted to include this slide as a tickler for some conversations that can be had with other city agencies such as SBS and EDC. So a few examples for MCROWN would be targeted construction job training and placement program, pop-up small business vendor markets with training grant program to help local residents participate, fund local artists and organizations to create street art murals and other public art, targeted zoning and financial incentives for developers to create non-residential space. So questions for next steps. How can we engage in community planning during COVID-19? Being very mindful that people are experiencing two pandemics at the same time, and now we have an epidemic of gun violence. So how do we properly engage in community planning? What kind of resources can DCP and other agencies provide? Should we consider supporting or should you consider supporting private applications that match the MCROWN framework? Discuss pros and cons, very important conversation. And if there's no immediate commitment to implement zoning, how should the community planning work be memorialized? How can the work that you've done for all this time be wrapped up in a nice pretty bow for the new administration to just bring it over the finish line? And that ends my presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna take the ball back so I can let the other folks in. Ms. Tyus. Unmute yourself, Ms. Tyus.
Okay. So everything I said was low. Thank you, Ms. Young. This has been very informative. And I'm sure the audience has questions. So I would ask people to raise their hand in the chat and ask Ms. George to coordinate that. So
Can one of your committee members assist? Because I'm trying to get presenters, Michelle.
Okay, so my usual request is
I
to
need to try to get
Ms. Weatherspoon, if she would be so kind as to monitor the chat and allow people to bring their questions forward. Ms. Weatherspoon,
sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So while people
Trying to get them in.
form their questions, you know how to raise your hand, or if you don't, it should be on that right-hand panel. Okay, so I'm going to ask one or two lead-in questions, and then as people post their questions, Ms. Weatherspoon will bring that forward, and Ms. Young can answer. Ms. Young, on the affordable housing issues, prior neighborhood studies, and HPD, when you talk about preservation programs, that I presume that is just preserving or increasing the existing number of housing units as opposed to historic preservation. Okay, I see your head going up and down. So that's a yes. The senior housing.
Forgive me, I'm sorry, I didn't know I was muted. Yes, that's correct. Should there be a historic, preservation initiative in the zone, then we bring in LPC, and that's a whole nother process.
True enough. And well, actually, okay, that's true. The senior housing you mentioned of Bergen and Dean, what is the north-south 4th Street you were talking about?
North, I believe so, Ethel. Let me get my notes on that. I believe so,
Both of
yes.
those are east-west. Burgundy run east-west. So we need a north-south cross street for me to pinpoint the senior housing that you're referring to.
Okay, I'm gonna look that up before we get off the phone. I should have an answer for you.
My last question to you before the other folks come in with your questions is the commitment. If there's no immediate commitment to implement zoning, which is something I hope Mr. Bearrat can help us visualize. Can you turn
And
your
everyone
radio down?
mute, and everyone mute their computers.
Okay, so then how would community planning be memorialized? So I'm wondering if we should be considering a memorandum of understanding with city planning, and if that would have weight with the mayor's office. I assume that it would, because DCP does have quote unquote police powers that spill over to all of the other mayoral agency functions. So that would be one suggestion that I would make. What do you think of that, Ms. Young? A memorandum of understanding?
I don't know that I could really speak for DCP on that. I think I would have to ask the agency what they think about that. But on the surface, on the face, I think that maybe is something that could be explored.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I would invite questions from the other attendees, participants.
Yes, Elaine Weinstein would like to find out how the open space will be prioritized in relation to the Bergen and Dean Street lots.
Right. So, hi, Tasha. Thanks so much for taking the question. First of all, to clarify, those lots are between Carlton and 6th Avenue. I know because I'm on that block. Okay. And the question really relates to the fact that you mentioned that that Lori Cumbo has supported senior housing there, which we have heard before as well. But would there also be an understanding that the neighborhood, not just that housing, but the neighborhood requires more open space? And might that be considered? Would Lori Cumbo support that for those particular lots?
We have been, since the onset of COVID, really trying to have conversations with HPD regarding Bergen and Dean. From maybe January, February, we hadn't gotten that far into the planning, but we're trying to follow up, and I certainly will bring your question back to the majority leader so she could then, pose it when they're ready to move forward. The last time we spoke, they're still figuring out how to do this whole thing remotely.
Okay.
I'm sure as among other things they're trying to figure out. But yes, I will definitely pose that to the majority leader so she can explore that with them.
Okay, the second phase of that question really has to do with whether the majority leader would support or not support upzoning, because it's a middle of the block development. And upzoning in the middle of the block is not something the neighborhood would support. So I think it's something else that we would appreciate you bringing back to her. Okay?
I will.
Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Other questions? Okay, seeing no other questions at this time, I ask Mr. Richard Bearrat from the Breslin.
Peter Crashes has a question. He just put in the chat. He has a question. Peter Crashes.
Yeah, hi. I'm going to just follow up on what Elaine said with a couple of points and questions. So in looking at the, I guess because of where we're located in the northern part of Prospect Heights and looking at MCROWN, 2 sites and Atlantic Yards, we're carrying the brunt of the change in Community Board 8, and we'll have the greatest density. But there's a couple of pieces of this that I think have to be considered. And I also would like to just, looking at the map of opportunities in the PowerPoint, I just want to address how they're located relative to the density, because I think it's of the community board and of Brooklyn generally. Actually, the city, which is one of the most densely developed areas in the city of New York. So the first issue that I think is really important, and it confuses everything. Atlantic Yards may not be completed. So you have a section, and that's the section that contains most of the open space. And that's the area that comes up to Vanderbilt. And I have seen that Department of City Planning, it's exactly adjacent to where MCROWN is, right across. I've seen that Department of City Planning justifies, or has at least at some point justified the density in the northern part of Prospect Heights being the highest in MCROWN because of its proximity to Atlantic Yards. That's section. There's no requirement that any developer complete it. That section is not in the development agreements. There's no obligation. There's no penalty. There's no penalty for not
Need folks
completing.
to mute their phone.
And that's where the open space is. Elaine raised the matter of the Dean, like of the potential for open space with Dean, especially with the Dean Street location, which is immediately adjacent to the playground and adjacent to the historic district too. That specific site is a rare opportunity the city would have in most areas to expand the open space where it's going to be in great demand, and also very close to the new middle school that's being developed, really on the same block. And that building, the middle school, won't have much outdoor open space. It's being located in the only building without dedicated open space in Pacific Park. The other thing, so I guess I just want to reiterate that you prioritize thinking of holistically, not just about MCROWN, but about all these different developments and how they intersect is important. And I'm asking, so my first question is the city council member and Department of City Planning looking at it that way? Are they looking at the opportunities in the area relative to all of these projects together at once? And they are all moving together at once. And the second part of it, I'm actually going to take this a little bit further than Elaine and say that what we've heard from HPD is that actually they do intend to pursue a minimum of 80 units of housing in one site of these two HPD sites. That will inevitably lead to an upzoning, basically doubling the number of units possible in the current zoning, which is R6B. They're middle of the block, and both sites are either adjacent to or they're adjacent to the historic district, among other things. So I guess I would ask how these sites got dedicated to be developed in this way to begin with. I mean, what was there a community process that chose the HPD sites for development? If the goal is to have those 80 units, could other sites be identified instead of just putting it all into one spot, already close to where there's a lot of density already? So that's two questions. I can clarify them if need be.
So, Tasha, unmute yourself. And Peter, what's the house number and street name?
For which? For the HPD lots? I can send the block and lot numbers to you probably before the end of the call, but I'm going to have
Okay, house number and street name will do for now.
I think offhand, I don't want to hazard the street, the house numbers. I can tell you it's Dean between Carlton and 6th, and it's Bergen between 6th and Carlton as well. And we can give you the block and lots. We can give you the house numbers.
That would have been great. Okay. Thank you.
We have run through this before, Ethel. So
Well, forgive me. It's your question. I just wanted a little bit more specificity for the purposes of this discussion. I'm sorry.
Okay. Put them in the chat later.
Okay.
I think I have it in the office. I have the addresses in the office.
Okay. So, Peter, you did make a statement about no penalties. What were you referring to?
I was referring to an Atlantic Yards development agreement. There's the only obligation is for in terms of completing the project and with penalties is the affordable housing. So affordable housing is complete. the developer doesn't need to continue necessarily. They may control of the development, but there are no financial penalties or anything else associated with not completing the site. And the most expensive area to develop by far is the area between Carlton and Vanderbilt and Pacific. That's an area where they've even conceded that they will need to shut down railroad tracks in order to develop it.
Okay, this
They
runs
haven't
counter,
made,
Peter, I'm sorry, this runs counter to my understanding that if they don't complete certain numbers of dwelling units by 2025, they start running a $1.3 million a month liquidated.
that's only for the affordable housing. And so once they move, there's 6,000, I think 300 units of housing in total in Atlantic Yards, and the affordable housing, 2,250 roughly, and those are a little less than half are complete already. So they can actually complete the affordable housing in the 3 buildings about, which would leave as many, between 3 and 4 buildings not completed. And again, the most expensive area to be completed is the area where the open space is, which for those of you guys who follow development probably isn't a big surprise. So keep that in mind.
Yes, we will, and we can pull the same thing the state did before, which is declare it a disaster zone, and the city can take it. But we can go into that. I'm sorry, Ms. Young, would you like to add to respond to Mr. Crassus, please?
Sure. I mean, I could try. I could try, right? But I think the requirement for open space is something that I really have to bring back to the majority leader and talk with our land use department and see where the opportunities are, and I'm not sure that I'm exactly understanding everything that you're saying, but it's something that I would have to bring back to her and get back to you, Peter. And then with Bergen and Dean, and the proposal is also something that, again, with this issue with open space and the upzone, I just have to bring back, the best thing I could do is bring back the concerns the community has to the majority leader before I could respond. It would really be premature and unfair for me to try to answer that question before I bring that question back to her.
This is an information gathering session.
Right.
Rather than a policy setting or action planning session for the majority leader staff. It's action planning for us as community board members. And we should take note and make note of plans that we feel as a group that we can execute once we can come to a agreement on this. One of our main action planners is going to be late to the meeting. He did notify me, but he plans to join us. Ms. Weatherspoon, are there other questions?
They are none.
Okay, then I would ask Mr. Barak to add to what we have seen already as recommendations for public improvements in this neighborhood rezoning. Mr. Barak?
Sure. So regarding where it was just talked about, the HPD sites, it is immediately abutting the playground across from 1000 Dean.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yes, it's zoned R60. So if one cannot achieve the number of units that were suggested, it would require rezoning. The other thing is, the way the city acquired the land, it still would probably require a ULURP to dispose of the property for housing purposes. So either way, I see this as something that's going to be a ULURP item. So it's not a quick item. And,
Thank you.
Certainly in the context of MCROWN, this is fine to be part of. Certainly, there are examples in other communities where schoolyards are also called jointly operated playgrounds, which means after hours, the Parks Department has interest in them, And so that could become a consideration. And there's been a movement to modify the asphalt surfaces to bring in the newer versions of the artificial turf. So that could help modify the type of activities there. And if any place is appropriate to try to get more hours out of spaces, embellishing with lighting to, when you can't easily make more land, if you can make more hours, and lighting certain times of the year can be part of that solution. Other open realm improvements that the borough president has been pushing in a piecemeal basis through the ULURPs when we have private sites, but can certainly be done in the context of city initiatives from downtown Brooklyn. Actually, a bunch of the crosswalks in downtown and surrounding areas extend into the parking lane as a safety measure to make the actual time a pedestrian is in front of traffic lanes that much less. So that's something that can be considered, whether there are explicit intersections that would be deemed a good idea. Sometimes it's done where the sidewalk literally extends out. Other times it's done at a lower budget, especially when utilities are there, where you'll see the city DOT uses this specialized surfacing, like a green rough painted surface, and they'll put in these plastic bollards sticking up to cue drivers that there's a space they're not supposed to be in. And that version requires a maintenance agreement with the property owner when DOT moves ahead with that. And that's sometimes done as a trial run instead of making it a permanent commitment. Other things that we've pushed for, borough presidents pushed for within the public realm, a way of absorbing the rainwater in a green water philosophy TEP came up with, where at one time was called bioswales, now DEP is calling it rain gardens. So looking at property frontages where the community might rather see sometimes within the roadbeds, sometimes within the sidewalk area where the sidewalk's wide enough to advance these rain gardens into the public realm as an improvement. So those are a couple of things. And then just because you may have areas where you have roadway widths which could go on a diet without adversely affecting car flow, there's a couple of things in addition to the slide that Tasha showed where the triangular park could grow into the street. You have a lot of wider streets that are your narrow streets. In a lot of communities, they're only 50, 60 feet wide. You have a lot that are 70, and there are unique situations where they're wider. So the board has seen bike lanes added on a bunch of those streets, especially the east-west streets. But there are many more east-west streets there that don't need to be main traffic flow like you have in north-south streets, except for Buffalo, that's interrupted by the public housing. So should more bike lanes be proposed in other corridors? But the other thing that's in this community is diagonal parking. Would it make sense to have some streets become diagonal parking as a way to slow the cars down and yet create more supply of parking in the street is affordable? So especially as more density comes into the neighborhood and smaller housing developments are not required to provide parking. The affordable housing now in transit zone, which you're in, does not require housing to provide parking. So over time, would the demand for provided parking garages get exceeded by additional cars coming into the area? And possibly introduction of car sharing, whether it be curbside car sharing, to try to have more universal car ownership. So car sharing, whether it be diagonal parking, whether it be curbside parking, that's something to think about. Do you want to integrate more city bike docks, which do take away from parking, but if you introduce diagonal parking, may offset it? And then there are places that you have open spaces, like Howard Park happens to have diagonal parking on one side. If that parking were adequately accommodated, diagonal parking elsewhere, could you bring the park further into the street? Those are can creatively find additional space. So just some ideas to think about.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?
Yes, Peter has a question.
Sorry,
Peter?
I sent
Okay.
a chat. I was asking what we should be anticipating in terms of the schedule for MCROWN in ULURP moving forward.
Well, I would ask Director Winston Von Ingle from DCP, I believe he's on the meeting, to respond to that.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. So in terms of the MCROWN rezoning, I don't think it will come as a surprise that obviously this year has been a tremendous, just a devastating year. We've all had to make changes. And that means our agency also, every one of us is working from home. We've had to reassess all of our priorities in terms of our work, our schedules. And at this time, we're simply not able to complete a rezoning as hoped for within the time frame of this administration. But that does not mean that we cannot do planning work with all of you. And we are intently listening to the comments and reactions here, the thoughtful work that Tasha Young provided to you all and that you're reacting to. And we look forward to working with you throughout the next weeks, months, and year to make that, to turn your ideas into a plan that can then be implemented when there is more time there and we have the means to implement it.
Thank you, Winston. The means is the critical element in trying to move this neighborhood rezoning forward, and it touches on who's going to pay for the work that has to be done to say that it's safe and proper and whatever else to change from what we have now with more than 50 years of chemicals in the soil to go to a residential use and so on and so forth. All of that work. Who's going to pay for that? Should we consider supporting private applications as Councilmember Rep. Tasha Young asked in the questions for the next step? And it's something that one of the main proponents of this rezoning has been asking over time. Mr. Gib Baconi is now on the line. I'd like to ask him to speak to that issue. I think that I've been pretty open that we should wait. We should ask property owners to wait so that we do a thorough review of what needs to happen there to get the most benefit out of any rezoning that's done as far as infrastructure planning and different agencies budgeting for the infrastructure changes that would be needed to get the most out of the land. But I want to hear from Gib because we didn't hear from him on Monday. He was away having a good time, and now he's back. So I want to hear from Gib.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me? I hope so. I apologize for coming late. I actually am coming to you just having gotten out of backcountry for 4 days, and so I'm not camera ready, and I am not running video. So I apologize. I think that one of the key questions is how much can we get done while this administration is in office? And, can we demonstrate that we have a public process that is moving forward in some way? And I guess in that vein, what I would ask is, I think a good I think a good indicator of that would be to be able to get to a scoping hearing, even if, you know, we're not able to move into ULURP. If we can come up with, if we can get to the point where we've created a scope for the ULURP process, we've gotten public input on the scope. I think that would demonstrate momentum and would make it more likely that the next administration would continue to pursue this effort as a neighborhood rezoning. And I would ask Winston if that might be a reasonable goal to take on together.
I would say what we've heard from all of you are a lot of questions, and a rezoning should not be taken very lightly. It means significant changes. And I think what we would like to do is to use the time that we now have to work with all of you to explore the issues, the questions that you have raised, to bring in agencies to answer your questions, to react to your ideas, to your concerns, and to first come up with a plan. I think that's the best that we can do within this very narrow time frame.
So if I may, just to rationalize that in terms of the timeline we were discussing before, you know, we were looking at getting to a scoping hearing sometime perhaps in the fall. When do you see that falling now, Winston?
I can't tell you, honestly. I don't believe that it's possible to do that within this administration. We've simply, in terms of the time that it takes to develop this work and the resources necessary, that we are not able to go that far in this short period of time.
But aren't we talking about a year and 5 months from now until the next administration?
Right. We're just talking about a draft scope at this point, not beyond that. That is out of reach now.
Again, it requires significant resources that we no longer have, right? The city has gone through a significant economic contraction in the past few weeks and months, and all of our budgets of the city agencies have been reduced significantly, and our ability to do work like this has been reduced, right? So to do a scoping meeting requires the hiring of environmental consultants, and we simply do not have a budget for the hiring of environmental consultants, and it's not a trifle.
How much are we talking about?
Environmental consultants for an environmental impact statement run in the millions.
Right.
Well, no, we're not talking about the whole EIS. Just doing just developing a scope.
Yeah, but in order to do that, there is actually a lot of work that goes into what is the scope, right? So for those who don't know what scope is, most of you do, but scope is the kind of work, the scope of work that will go into an environmental impact statement. And in order, before you even get there, you have to do an environmental analysis to understand whether or not you're triggering any thresholds, any impact for potential for impacts. So that means you do have to do a relatively complete environmental analysis in order to understand what impacts you might trigger, might be as a result of the rezoning, in order to then prepare a scope of work where the EIS will then further look into those impacts, right? And so that is a lot of work. That includes, and sadly, much of it is really about traffic and people driving and having cars and using those. It affects traffic and air quality and noise, all as a result of cars, as well as open space and schools and sewers and water and all the other aspects that go into the environmental review. So it's not a very simple thing to just put together a scope of work.
Ms. Tyus or Ms. George, I just wanted to see if you might be able to make me presenter here. I'd like to just put up the timeline that was presented at the April 23rd MCROWN meeting, just so we can get a sense of where we are, what's reasonable to do now based on the tasks that were presented in that timeline.
Okay, give me a second.
1 second. Thank you.
Okay, I'm glad that's coming forward. I think it'll help us all, Winston, if we can find a way to piecemeal this thing. So that we get some portions completed rather than saying we're going to shelve the entire effort until we have the entire $1.5 million, $2 million to do the work in a bundle. If we could.
Again, if I may, I think the strength and the power of this plan that we are working together is the support that you and all of the other panelists here can give it during this process, right? And that is best done when we are able to walk you through, have you, together, talk with other city agencies, answer your questions, respond to your concerns, and address them to the best way possible so that we can then together put together a plan.
Okay.
So I'm now.
Just a second. The community boards will be looking at upcoming budgeting. So if we could get from your office budget ranges for the parts that Gib is about to walk through, we can approach the agencies individually and parcel it out. Go ahead, Gib, please.
Well, I just wanted to bring this up just so we could understand kind of what was laid out a few months ago and then see where we are now. So first question is, when we look at these timelines, where are we now?
Hi, Gib. This is Jonah. I just want to clarify. So where we are now is in the public outreach phase. When we drafted this timeline, first it was meant to be somewhat conceptual. There are a lot of pieces and steps along the way. We really, and it was also quite ambitious, and so we wanted to just be aware of different steps. I think before even to get to scoping, we had thought of a number of outreach steps, such as going over capital planning and infrastructure planning, talking about housing and other topics that members of the committee raised. I think that process, takes quite a bit of time and leads up to discussing zoning and land use. So I just want to clarify that, I think we see a lot of opportunity to continue the engagement and dive into some of these topics more in depth. Scoping is a more advanced piece of the proposal.
Okay, I understand that, but so I'm good with this top time frame. I think we understand that. We're talking about ongoing public engagement, looking at the tasks that are represented here. Hopefully people see my mouse and WebEx here. Now I want to look at this bottom timeline though. What about the bottom timeline? So here we have developed neighborhood plan, land use application, urban design, zoning, capital plan, draft scope of work, draft environmental impact statement. Oops, sorry about that. Pardon me. So we know that so we just heard we're not doing the EIS, right? We're not doing the draft scope of work. What are the other tasks here are we doing? What can we get done in the time frame remaining in this administration?
Year and a half.
So I could speak, and I'll let others on. We have our full team here as well. I think we're looking at not the land use application itself or the scope, but urban design, zoning, capital planning, and I just want to say those are very robust, complicated things that requires back and forth with agencies, a lot of coordination internally within the department. So even though we can't get to scoping, we can really advance the work and kind of fully lay the groundwork, so to speak. But I would say too that we also want to hear from you and what you think is what you and the committee and others feel is a good use of our time and how we can advance this together.
Well, from my point of view, I think that doing work that creates the foundational stuff that's necessary to move these timelines ahead at some point is important. And I also believe that some of these tasks listed under developed neighborhood plan would be important tasks that would yield meaningful information for the rest of the community as well. So for instance, urban design and zoning, I think would be very helpful to get into to the extent that we could create a draft zoning plan, which is something that many of the community members and many of the committee members on this call, I think, have expressed interest in. But what we think, what we think is important, but we've moved from a discussion of what we think is important to kind of a discussion of, now we're resource boxed. And so we kind of have to rely on you guys to say, look, what is it that we can do? But let me just ask, that as a, as a deliverable. Can we get to the point where where you all can propose a draft zoning?
I would say that yes, we can work towards that goal. We absolutely can work towards that goal, right? That would be the idea that we continue to work together and develop a zoning proposal together.
When?
Now I want to be. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Winston. I'm really not. But I think in this environment, we also want to understand, and we want our group of stakeholders to understand what they can expect to see, as real progress within the next year and a half. So working towards, yes, I'm sure we can work towards it, but can we actually deliver it in a year and a half? Is that a commitment you all can make?
I think it's possible. Yeah. Right. I mean, we're talking about putting together something, a plan, and that obviously is based upon an understanding of what the community would like to see happen here, and then how to accomplish it. And it is absolutely right. I mean, we're talking about the need, the desire to create affordable housing. That requires changes in the zoning. There is no requirement right now in any of the zoning, not in any, excuse me, but there is no requirement in many of the areas of this community district for affordable housing to be included in new development, right? And so that's something that we can work on, like where in the MCROWN area, what should the zoning be?
Well, I mean, let me just be specific though. We already have kind of a framework that that the community board has adopted, and so what we're talking about now is taking that to the next step and proposing zoning around it. And that I guess I'm saying that's something that I think many of the committee members have expressed an interest in seeing, and is kind of the logical next step. Is that a reasonable thing for us to do in the next year and a half?
Yes, I think in the next year and a half, sure. Yes.
Okay.
I think that is.
I just want to go on record that what I said on Tuesday, I think it was, about making everything R2 was a joke. We all know that, right? Okay, just want to be clear. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I think that, I mean, I think that would be an important goal for us. That's probably on this second line here, while we're working on public engagement and engaging with agencies. I think that putting together the draft zoning is an important activity for us. And I mean, I'm only speaking for myself, but it seems like something we should consider focusing on at this stage.
I agree with you, Gib. Should we put this to a vote?
Well, I think it's most, if it's something that the city planning team is able to commit to,
Right, but I would give, I think if I may, give, I think a zoning proposal is, I would argue, is part and parcel of a larger plan. And part of a larger plan is having, is a housing plan. It's also thinking about open space and addressing urban design and street and street improvements, pedestrian improvements, those kinds of things. I think we consider those part and parcel just as important as a zoning proposal. And they go hand in hand. And we would like to see you all understand what the city's tools are and how they can be implemented alongside a zoning, a rezoning, and to make sure that there is a comfort level here in the community for changes in the zoning. I hope that that's.
How would you assess that, Winston? We've been over these concepts a number of times over the past year, and I think the members of this audience are familiar now with what the community wants. And on one hand, I hear you agreeing that we can do a draft zoning plan, but then a moment later, I'm reluctant to ask you for a revision to this MCROWN draft process and timeline that gives up so that we can see, and looking for a memorialization of our understanding of when and where this project is going, when and how this project is going to proceed. So
Right.
I don't want to box you in, but
No, you're not boxing us in. Look, just on this call, right? We heard concerns about rezoning, increasing density, about density, right? And previously, we heard questions, and I don't. Those are reasonable questions and concerns. And we've also heard questions about the population change that has taken place or is taking place in this part of Brooklyn and throughout Brooklyn and the city. And those are things that we believe we are looking into further into those questions that you've raised, and you deserve answers to. And I would say that there is before we can go forward, and there is a level of comfort on everyone's part, I think there ought to be at least these issues discussed. There may not be agreement, but there should be a full discussion so that you all understand the implications.
I think we're
I
hearing
agree.
fear of unbridled increased density as potential private applicants point at Atlantic Yard, Pacific Park, and say they want to harmonize their proposed developments with that. And this is another reason why I believe we've documented that this community board will not support private applications in general. So the concerns that you're voicing about, that you're hearing from members of this audience about increased density, is because they have not fully joined in the community board's resistance to entertaining private applications, which is something that we will be memorializing at our full board meeting, either in September or October, so that there is no question that would retard the progress of this neighborhood rezoning in the eyes of DCP, that we're not sure about what we want.
No, I'm.
If I could I jump in for a second? Alex Summer, for those who don't know me. I think what we're saying is that we're committed to working on developing the zoning and the urban design framework and all of the associated kind of policies that we can develop without conducting an environmental analysis at this time. I think what Winston's referring to is that there has to be an ongoing dialogue about what ultimately the zoning districts would be. And I think we don't want to just say, here's the zoning, what do you guys think? We want to talk through all of the different implications about the different densities, the different heights, different ways that we can modify our zoning regulations to accommodate local and unique conditions. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Tice. I don't want to cut you off.
I like that. That's new. I didn't know you. This is new. I'm very.
And so I like that. It requires like an ongoing dialogue, and I think why we're a little hesitant to say it's going to take X number of months is because we're in a new environment of technology, and we haven't tried out all the different methods of public engagement with this new reality and with these new considerations. And so, like I said, what you're hearing from us is we're committed to continuing our planning work with you and everybody on the call. It's just we don't know what that looks like. And what Jonah was saying earlier is I think we really want to hear from you about how to engage in that dialogue so that it's not just a series of letters back and forth, but it's really meaningful conversations about when we go from one zoning district to another zoning district, we're actually talking about how many apartments, how many families, and what that means. And that's okay, really what we want to have that dialogue for.
But if I may, this is Gib. I don't want to minimize either what we're going through with the COVID emergency or what it's meant for the city budget. I mean, both of those are very serious things. I want to point out that the plan that we're looking at on the screen right now was presented, you know, a month and a half into the COVID emergency. Now, obviously, things have developed since then, but I mean, at this point, we knew that we were doing some of these activities virtually. You know, so let's just understand that we didn't do this in a complete vacuum, and that things have changed, and we need to just simply adjust what our plan is. And some of the discussion we're having here makes it sound like something has prompted us to, you know, go back to an earlier stage in the process than really that I think can be rationalized. We already have a zoning framework. The zoning framework has indicative densities in it. We've already done bulk analysis. We have a feel for how many apartments are going to be created and how many of those apartments will be affordable apartments. So I don't think it's helpful to give other folks on the call the idea that somehow, you know, maybe people who are not as familiar with all of these things in detail have them get the idea that this work somehow hasn't been started yet. It's actually quite far along. I think what we need really simply is just a new plan, a new work plan. And if the work plan is developing the neighborhood plan as Winston and Alex and Jonah have explained it, then let's lay that out and let's look at that as an objective. I think that there's lots of value in all of that. And alongside of that, just as this timeline indicates, we'll be able to continue to do public outreach in the process. So I don't see any of this as being incompatible at all. I don't think any part of what we put together has been, you know, has been negated or needs to be, you know, reconsidered. I just think we need to modify what our goals and what our plan is on the basis of resources. And I would just ask, you know, Winston and Alex and Jonah, if you're able to sort of recast this plan in terms of what we now know about resources, let's do that, and let's just see where we are, and let's keep moving forward. Does that make
Excuse
sense?
me. Excuse me. This is Irsa. I just want to have it known that we have two people that are waiting for a while now to ask a question. So Desmond will be first and Sarah will be next, so we can get everyone, you know, that wants to speak to have the opportunity.
Thank you.
Desmond?
Unmute yourself. Where is it? Can you unmute yourself, Desmond? You have to unmute yourself. Ms. George, can you unmute him?
I cannot. I have to get the ball back from Gib. I'm trying to do that.
Okay.
Oh, sorry about that. Hang on, let's see. Did that help? I don't see what else I can do to change it.
I think we need to switch from WebEx to Microsoft Teams.
Hang on.
I heard that.
This is
I don't seem to be the host anymore.
No, it looks like Mr. Atkins is unmuted now.
good. There he is. Hi, Sarah. Desmond, go ahead. Hello, Desmond. Desmond, your computer needs to be using WebEx for audio. Desmond Atkins. Okay, so who else is next?
Sarah, while we're waiting on Desmond, why don't you ask your question?
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
We can hear you. Okay.
Yeah. Now, okay, I'm really just trying to follow this as someone who's kind of new to the land use processes and ULIP processes and trying to learn and catch up. But I guess from what I'm understanding is that, obviously it's the city budget that is vastly diminished because of the crisis. And so it's the environmental impact statement that is the most expensive thing to produce. And so that's the piece that is forcing all of this to be delayed. But some of the other things are less expensive, like the urban design and capital planning, et cetera. And I guess I'm wondering, like, I guess I understand if something very big like the environmental impact statement needs to be delayed. Does that mean that the things on the other timeline keep going, like the community engagement meetings and things like that? And then I also just had another total newbie question. I don't fully understand what capital planning is. I don't know if there's like a 30-second explanation of it for us newbies. I might
Hi,
be doing it wrong,
Sarah.
but
Maybe I could take a stab at it. I think those are great questions. And absolutely, we want to work on the community engagement. There's a formal engagement process related to ULIRP, but for neighborhood planning, we do much earlier engagement, and part of that is just relates to capital planning as well. But I would say that, so maybe I'll answer your question in two parts. So first, capital planning is based on whenever we're considering growth in a larger area, we're looking at a whole assortment of projects that support that growth and also the surrounding community. So it's looking at everything from parks, open space, streets, sewers. So we often describe that as public realm, but it's kind of a much broader umbrella of infrastructure and also of priorities that we hear from the community. And then I guess the reason I'm answering that first is because that relates back to the community engagement in that so for the environmental review, that requires consultant work that is very, very expensive, as we mentioned. But within the Department of City Planning, we have a lot of existing resources, and then we can also tap into our colleagues from other agencies. And those are just using the staff that we already have and the team that we already have, many of whom are on the call today. And that's work that we can do within the existing budget. But the environmental review really requires an expensive EIS and consultant work that unfortunately we just don't have at this time. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry, that was a little, those are great questions, by the way. But
yeah,
they're
I
very
feel
interrelated.
like I'm a student who's trying to just, yeah, I think those answer the questions. I mean, for one thing, I had no idea that environmental impact statements were not produced by the city themselves. So I learned something. I didn't realize that it was that outside consultants were the people who do that kind of thing.
Just a quick clarification, they are produced by us, but we rely on consultants to perform a lot of the analysis. So for air.
I'm sorry, boots on the ground kind of thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think environmental review warrants its own conversation, but a lot of the cost and resources are done by consultants.
Okay, is Desmond, anything else, Sarah, on there?
Desmond, if you're ready, please ask your question.
Can't get in. I don't know what happened. I see him, he's still there.
He said he was trying to unmute himself, but I unmuted him, so I don't understand why.
I spoke to Desmond. He said that he kept talking and talking, but I told him we were not hearing him. I suggested that he send his question via chat, and he said that he was trying to do that also, but it seems like he's having some technical difficulties.
Okay.
I have a question. His question is, can Winston delineate the exact steps that are within the scope? Basically a flow chart and a rough range of dollar figures involved within each step of the scope. This way, you can plan for a future action plan.
I'm thinking about how to answer the question. I would say if I may step back, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We still need to do a lot of have a lot of planning work ahead of us before we can even start the environmental work. I think we want you to sign on to the zoning proposal and to embrace it, so that we can actually then, in good conscience, ask for the amount of money that it takes to do a full environmental impact statement. But in terms of in fairness, because this member of this committee is not able to fully explain the question, but any land use change requires some form of environmental review, and the more significant the change is, the more involved and intense the environmental review is. There is a document, a technical manual that spells out exactly how environmental reviews are to be conducted. And in that technical manual, there are charts in which you can imagine, for a small zoning change, a small increment or change in the land use, not much review is needed. But for one, as it gets larger, there are certain thresholds, milestones reached, at which point a more intense review is required, right? So a scope of work, there are about, I think, if I'm not right, about 23 separate categories to be considered for environmental review. And I listed some of them a little bit earlier. And so the first thing that you do for any zoning change is, when you conduct an environmental review, whoever it is, you go through each category and you see whether or not you are exceeding the threshold for your proposal. And if it is a small change, right, then you're going to be below the thresholds. But as you get larger, it's a larger rezoning, you will reach the threshold. There are automatic triggers, right? You're introducing X amount of square feet of commercial space, or a certain amount of housing. And that will, and that it has the potential, it doesn't say it does, but the potential to have an impact. And so that then it's almost like, oh, this one, and then you put it aside and says, okay, that one needs to be studied. And from that, you develop a scope of work. We will be studying traffic because we expect this many cars. We will be studying schools because we expect this many, this much housing, which triggers this many, likely this many people, who would likely have this many children, who will then send their kids to schools, and the schools are at this capacity, so likely need to study schools, maybe have an impact on schools, maybe have an impact on air quality, maybe have an impact on open space. That is considered, each one of those go into the scope of work that then is discussed publicly, right? The public gets to review it. Did we catch everything that we're supposed to study for this? So did we miss an intersection? Did we miss a playground? Did we miss a development site? Did we forget about anything? And that then, once that is completed, then it's like a work program for consultants to then continue and to actually look into this much further, and to then write out an environmental impact statement. And that is what a scope of work is. And in terms of cost, they literally go into the millions.
If I could just maybe make a suggestion and maybe get us a little bit out of what I think is, a very detailed explanation of what the process is, and just bring it back up to what I'm hearing, which is really a concern about something tangible to hold on to with this relationship between all parties on this call. And, at one point there was a timeline, and, that is in question. It's not going to go before the majority leader. So even, to Ethel's questions about a memo of understanding, I think what I'm hearing that the community is saying is, what tangible commitment, besides we will work with you and we will hear you out, what are some benchmarks that we can maybe put in place? What is something that the community could walk away with confidently, knowing that this is the process that we're going to go through, with benchmarks that will be met and committed to by the city agencies? Maybe when are we going to talk to other city agencies? That I just am getting a sense that this ambiguity is making people, not feel very confident in what this process is going to look like. It's too much uncertainty. Even for me on this call, it's like, well, when is it and what is it and how are we going to do it? And without those questions really being answered in a way that satisfies the community board, we're going to keep kind of going through these what feels like platitudes that can change, because there's no feeling of a real commitment to certain benchmarks. How did I do, Gib?
Yeah, no,
Yeah, because Gab is
I would.
waiting.
I'd like to say I share Tasha's concerns, and she could have taken the words out of my mouth. And I think that there's an opportunity to address them by simply updating the plan that was presented back in April. I think we just have to look at where we are now in terms of time and resources, and provide a plan with specific milestones and tasks, as Tasha mentioned, so everyone understands what we're talking about. One of the things I liked about the plan that was presented before is we had separate tracks there for outreach and you know, the traditional planning tasks that Winston was describing. And we can do those things in parallel. I don't think we should, you know, I wouldn't want to give the impression that we're conflating them somehow. So I'd like to ask again, Winston, if can you provide an updated plan for, based on your current available resources and you know what we had been discussing in the spring?
Yeah, sure. I hear, I think Tasha, I agree with Tasha. I think what you're grasping for is like, give us something tangible. And as I was listening to what Tasha was saying, and of course what you were saying as well, Gib, is that, look, you know, we met with you it was now, I think, almost 2 months ago or so, the last time, right? And then, right, we paused, right? And we paused because we were told, stop, things have changed dramatically in the city and we need to reconsider. And we're back now, and conditions obviously have changed, but our interest and our commitment to work with you on putting together a plan have not. What has changed is the schedule in terms of deliverables. It is obviously drawn out, and we want to take advantage of that more expanded time frame that we have for outreach to really get it right? We would like to come back to you with HPD. We would like to come back to you with more information about the demographic changes. We would like to come back to you with other agencies like DOT and parks. But we need to, we need to start, and we're ready to start or to continue that work with you. This was intended to be an update meeting, and I think the next meeting with you should be where we can tell you when and where we can meet with the next city agency and what other information you want.
But Winston, can I ask, beyond just what the immediate next step is, can you actually just give us an updated plan, a time and event schedule that looks like what was presented in April, that's been recast in light of current resources? Can that happen, let's say maybe at our September meeting?
That will be for October, Gib.
Okay, can that happen at our October meeting?
To do what? To like deliverables or something like that?
Like, yeah, a few minutes ago, I had shown a slide from the April 21st presentation. Can we get something with maybe slightly more detail than that, but basically covering those same two timelines, showing what we now expect to be able to accomplish between now and the end of 2021?
I'm struggling because I'm honestly, I think we can certainly come back to you. I actually would prefer that we need to talk with you. We need to discuss with you about what it is, what other information it actually is that you should know about, right? I think we want to talk to you like we had heard from you.
Wait a minute, let me ask the question though. Is this new? Did something that was, because none of this was a factor on April 23rd when did something happen that changed the information you need from us that didn't exist at the time that we discussed the previous schedule?
I think the previous schedule was based on at that time, a rational presumption that we had resources available to do environmental review and that we had the time available and other means available to get this project done by the end of the administration. And that is simply no longer true. Right?
We got that. I totally understand that. What I'm saying now is let's recast that schedule given the resources have changed. what I'm thinking, I heard you say was we need more information, and I'm not clear as why you need more information before we recast the schedule with current resources.
Well, I think, what do you mean we need more? When did I say that we need more information? More information from you or more information from agencies?
What I asked was, can we present a new schedule so everyone will know what we can accomplish, what we expect to be able to accomplish during the remaining term of the administration at our October meeting? And what I thought I heard you say was, yes, but we need more information from you. And so I just want to understand what that information is.
Yes. So it is your interest in what it is that you want to learn about, right? When we were speaking, when we were meeting earlier this year, right, we presented you with information about the demographic change in the community, and legitimate questions were raised about what does that mean? What is the effect on housing? And what we suggested is that it would be good for you to hear from our housing agency, from HPD, about the programs that they have and the methods and tools that they have to increase the amount of affordable housing in the city and here in Crown Heights.
All right,
we also heard
I'm sorry, but I want to go. Yeah. I want to go back to what Tasha said. We can't. I really am frustrated that it sounds like we're going to go around. It's everything you're saying is fine, but none of that should exclude our ability to come back with a new schedule at this point. I don't understand that. We had a schedule. The only assumption that has changed between then and now is resources, and we should be able to recast it. Now, I'm glad you mentioned the presentation on demographics, because one of the things we suggested at the time, that meeting took place with the steering committee and DCP, and we suggested that presentation, or at least a summary of it, be made to this committee. Is there any reason why we can't do that now? Can we do that at the September meeting or any meeting? I mean, I'm sorry to sound frustrated, but
no, by all means, yes, absolutely. And I think that's what and you missed the meeting on Tuesday, right? We talked about coming back to you all with follow-ups to that. Okay. Yes, by all means. So no, I mean, in terms of a schedule, right? There is you wanted us to present to the steering committee, excuse me, to the subcommittee about demographics. Happy to do that, right? You also had questions about HPD, about housing programs. We can absolutely do that and come back to you with HPD in the next few months. We are happy to talk with. I think we want to do this in concert with you. We can draw up a schedule, right? We can say put a plan together by the end of this administration. Okay. Right. But what is it that goes between now? What goes inside the schedule between now, the end, and the end of the administration? And that's the thing that we wanted to hear from you. We have some ideas, right? We mentioned demographics, we mentioned HPD, parks, housing, DOT, but we want to hear from you. What else is there? We would love to discuss with you once it's completed. Show you a zoning proposal and discuss it with you, and make changes to it as necessary, so that we can put this all together. But we need to hear from you what it is that you are interested in learning more. What other questions do you have? What else do you need?
Okay, let me.
Wait.
I'm sorry. Winston, you mentioned 23 categories of review for thresholds that automatically trigger the next steps. And I believe you were referring to the city's environmental quality review manual. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that is available online and we will be looking at that. But the answers that I'm hearing now, a plan to be made available by the end of this administration, is not what Gib is asking. Gib is asking for a plan now. for what we can do between now and the end of the administration. And your response was you'll have a plan by the end of this administration on how to move forward by the end of this administration. That's not what we're asking. And Tasha's comments were right on point. So we need to close this gap of vagaries. And even if the plan is skeletal, it should be from now to the end of this administration. We don't know who the next mayor is going to be, but that's what we're asking you for.
Yeah, I really think we have to focus on an update to what was previous to the timeline that was presented in April 23. I understand what you're saying, Winston, but I'm going to push back on any suggestion that somehow we need to rethink or that something has happened that caused us to rethink any assumptions on April 23rd other than resources. I don't see that. And let me tell you why I'm being so insistent about this. It's because right now, the community board has taken a position that we don't want to support private ULURP applications. And that's an exceedingly strong position. And if we don't have a plan that shows how we're going to deliver something meaningful, that shows a public process that can extend into the next administration, we're going to have a very difficult time defending that. And I need you to understand that and help us on it.
If I can, okay, I'm, I hear you. We did not suggest that you not review or consider. That is the community board's prerogative to do about private applications. We can, and I would disagree with you, Gib. A lot has changed in the past 4 months since April and today. In April, we as a city, we weren't yet as aware of the significant changes that COVID would bring to us. And so let me go back to something tangible, right? We have in the past worked on projects that are then at the end of administrations that have then gone on to the next administration that the next administration has then proceeded to implement. And I think I gave you all some examples previously. East New York was a project that our agency worked on in the Bloomberg administration with a grant from the Obama administration, right? That the de Blasio administration took on and said, let's implement this. If you will, planning for downtown Brooklyn started under the Giuliani administration. Planning for Greenpoint and Williamsburg started under the Giuliani administration. These are all ideas and visions that were developed in one administration and then executed in the next administration. And in part, it was done because the resources, the timing wasn't there to complete the work within that administration, and partly because there was thought that there would be more political support for this, or there wasn't any financial support for it at the time, right? So that's why we're suggesting that let's work until the end of this administration. Let's work together to put together a great plan that then can be presented to the next council member, to the next mayor, where this community can say, we stand behind this, and we would like for you now to implement this. And the value or the power of that plan is vested in the amount of community buy-in. And that's the part that we really want to work on with you, is to make sure that all of your questions are answered, that you're comfortable. And we see this, in as much as this delay is inadvertent, we see it also as an opportunity to work with you to be more thorough. Right.
Okay, but I want to make sure that it's, because I really would not want any of the committee members to be to be confused about this. And I don't think they are, but I want to make sure it's understood. The community board has not changed its objectives for the MCROWN plan. The community board has not changed its adoption of the framework that DCP presented. The community board, I mean, regardless of what's transpired in conversations here, there's a tremendous amount of interest in this subject, but there is no change in the objectives for this part of Community District 8. And I think that I don't, and I haven't heard anything, quite frankly, that makes me think that any other assumptions from the spring have changed other than resources due to COVID-19 or due to the fallout from COVID-19, which is totally legitimate. Nobody, I don't think anyone does not understand the stress the city is in right now and understands the resource constraints. That's absolutely legitimate. Our challenge now is how are we moving forward, and are we as a community board, are we moving forward on the same basis that we last communicated to our stakeholders? And I think in that world, to the extent that we see progress being made according to those objectives, we have a good message to deliver to them. If it sounds like I would really caution us not to give the impression there are goals or objectives that are somehow being reconsidered here. That is not what is taking place.
And I didn't say that, but you, right? But you asked good, legitimate questions about the demographic change in the community, right? And we have actually done some more research into it, right? And looking into and have gotten more information, more background to it that we can share with you, right? We also, in this schedule that we showed you that you had put up, right? The amount of interaction of feedback loop would have been really minimal, right? We're hoping that we can actually show you a zoning proposal and discuss it with you and give it the amount of time that it actually deserves to for you to understand it, for us to make potential changes to it, and then right to have it presented publicly.
That all sounds good. I think we're all, I mean, we're right. This is one of the things that's challenging for me in this discussion, because I don't think we have any misalignment in that objective. We're simply looking for a way to manage the process through a defined plan that's based on the plan we've already seen, but updated for resources. And we hope that's something that you can share with us at our October meeting. Does that sound reasonable?
We can certainly talk to you. Let's try and put something together that tries and addresses what it is that you're looking for. Right? Let's try and do that. Right?
Okay.
But
I'm putting a link in the chat to the city's environmental technical manual for environmental quality review. Is that okay, Winston? Will that help? Do you think that'll help us get to the educated level you want to get?
Ethel, sure, but I would, you know, I would just say that the environmental review is really the tail of the dog.
Oh, true. Okay.
Right? You want to know, right? Imagine what the environmental review would have been for the Brooklyn Bridge. Right? So if we're building a bridge, what is likely to happen, right? I mean, it's like, did you want to have the bridge built, or you know, if you, so yes, by all means, it may help people who have questions about environmental review and what is all involved. But I would say the strength of a plan is the substance of it, not the environmental review.
Okay, so, but you did mention that it would be a 23 stepwise process
Yes.
to go through that. So I want to share that with our attendees here. And as I look at the map for the MCROWN area and surrounding blocks, it behooves me to bring forward the fact that part of the map is covering what is currently the Crown Heights North Historic District, phases 1 and 2, and then going west on the map, it includes part of the proposed Crown Heights Historic District Phase 4, which was written up in the Crown Heights West rezoning as a historic resource. And we do have Deborah Young on the line, on the call, as well as Irsa Witherspoon, who are members of the Crown Heights North Association. I'm hoping they'll have something to say about the effects of public realm improvements would have on the current and proposed historic district. Ms. Young or Ms. Weatherspoon? Hello? She's not. She's unmute. You have to unmute yourself, Ms. Young. Ms. Weatherspoon?
Deb is
I
about
don't
to
have
speak.
nothing to say. Don't do that.
Okay.
Don't.
Well, they have, Ms. Young doesn't want to contribute to that discussion right now, but I just want to point that out. As we look at public realm improvements, the map includes current and proposed segments of the Crown Heights North Historic District. So we can move on from there or go back to asking for a updated plan, even if it's skeletal.
Yeah, Ms. Tyus, if I might, could I move the committee, move that the committee request an updated schedule for the MCROWN rezoning be presented by the Department of City Planning at our October meeting, so that it may consider how best to proceed.
Is that your motion?
It is.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Everybody.
Sorry, could the motion be repeated?
I would like to move the committee request an updated schedule for the tasks for the MCROWN rezoning be presented by the Department of City Planning at the October meeting for the purposes of assisting the committee in determining how to proceed.
Second.
I'm going to call the roll. I'm going to try to call the roll from the list of panelists that we have. I'm not going in alphabetical order because that's not how I have it. I vote yes. Deborah Young.
Yes.
Desmond Atkins. You can vote with raised hand, maybe? This is difficult. Can you raise your hand, Mr. Atkins? This is difficult. We have to clean this up. Ms. Weatherspoon? You can unmute yourself or raise your hand.
Desmond said yes in the chat. Princess James seconded the motion also in the chat. They can put their responses in the chat.
Okay. Sarah's a second, Princess is a second. So far we have, yes. Are you able to record this, Ms. George?
The meeting's being recorded, yes.
Okay, so next is call the roll based on the list of participants. Not in alphabetical order, going in the chat. Peter Crassus. Raise your hand or put it in the chat. We have Princess Finn James voting by text. Sarah Lazar was the second. Sharon Wedderburn.
There's a question. Do we have a quorum of committee members?
I believe we do with 23. Question, I'm not seeing these questions. The question came in by text?
No, it came to me at the host.
Okay,
Do we have a quorum of committee members was the question.
okay. I'm looking at all attendees. We have 23 people, call-in 7. I'm not able to see it all, so I have to depend on you to answer that question.
I'm trying to count them. How many people do we need?
But everyone that's on here are not committee members.
Correct.
Right.
So I don't know that answer either.
We had 18 at the last in-person meeting. We had 18 members. So a quorum would be 10. Go back.
I see that we have 10.
Okay,
Those 10 would be me, Ms. Young, Mr. Atkins, yourself, Ms. Witherspoon, Mr. Crassus, Ms. Ben James, Ms. Lazur, Ms. Wedderburn.
There's someone on here by the name of John. They didn't give a last name. I don't know who John is.
But I think I just listed 10 people.
yeah, if he was a committee member, we know his last name. Unless he's a new board member.
I don't know who John is. So I don't know.
Okay,
We have 10 members, so that's the quorum you guys said?
yes, yes. 18 total for the entire committee if they all show up. Quorum to do business would be a majority of that. So that would be 10. And we were counting. You're getting votes by text. I'm not seeing everything here. How many yeses do we have, Ms. George?
One, Desmond Atkins. He's the only one.
Okay, then I'm to.
I think I heard Ms. Young vote yes in the roll call.
Yes, okay. Ms. Weatherspoon, I think voted yes as well.
Yes, I did, Gib.
Okay,
And I voted yes too.
That's Princess, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have
Sarah Lazar votes yes.
Sarah, okay, she was a second. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 10. The motion passes. So we are asking formally for a presentation of the updated plan for October. I hope that city planning will be able to meet us on that.
The question, would it, so the presentation from DCP on housing and demographics, is that still on the table? I mean, I'd be interested in that.
Absolutely. I hope
That
so.
was-
It's up to Mr. Barton Engel. It's up to Winston.
No,
It was
no,
an
it's,
excellent.
we're happy to do that, and I really appreciate your question, Sarah, about this. This is, it's like, let's get started doing this. We can certainly share with you a plan for how to move forward, how to get to a plan or something by the end of this administration, and then have you react to it and say, okay, we want to know more about this and less about that, and we care about this, and then let's do this. Yes, absolutely.
But I'm sorry, I keep saying by the end of this administration. We're asking for it for October.
If I may, I think when we use the plan, we're overloading the word plan. When Winston says plan by the end of the administration, I believe he's talking about a neighborhood plan that includes zoning, that includes urban design and the like. What the committee just asked for was an updated schedule to get to that
Right.
point.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to also say that the presentation that we saw on demographics that the Department of City Planning presented was excellent. It had a number of important insights about what's happening in Community District 8 that I believe would influence more than just the MCROWN project. And so it would be terrific to have that presentation be given to the Land Use Committee, if not the entire community board.
Okay.
Also, Desmond Atkins has a question.
Okay. Okay, the question is, I'm not seeing it in the chat. Can someone, is there a way for him to ask his question or put it
He
in?
wants to know if there are any pertinent updates in the 833-page manual that might affect our study, the 2014 edition.
Well, if you read the website carefully, there's an update there. The update is from 2016, but it's a fair question. Does anyone at DCP know if there's anything more recent than 2016 in the secret technical manual?
I don't think so. It maybe, but again, I would let on the environmental review side, you're worrying about, if I may, as an analogy, you're worrying about whether or not, like what kind of an engine goes in the car when we're trying to travel from point A to point B, right? And it really is about, I would argue, it's about the contents of the planning document. It is about regardless of what the environmental review says, is, do you want to see more housing? Do you want to see an expansion, improved pedestrian safety projects on Atlantic Avenue? Do you want to see, and where do you want to see open space improvement, parks improvements? What kind of buildings would you like to see? What shape, what height, what uses do you want to see? Those are important. The environmental review is reactive. It looks at that and says, if you do this, then this is what might occur. And you'll take a look at it and you'll say, we're okay with that. Or you might say, we're not. But I would say, wait, do the planning and then worry about the environmental review. Don't, the environmental review just tests to see what might be the effects if you implement this plan, and then it's up to you all to decide whether or not you're okay with that or not, right?
Sounds logical.
So I think, we hear you. Richard wants to apparently speak as well. And I've spoken enough.
Mr. Barrett, can you unmute yourself?
Unmuted, I believe.
Okay.
So I think one of the things that Winston brought up is very important in terms of the size of the buildings and things like that, the uses, because you've got to, right, that there might be a certain number of units that can be developed. And so from that, we might have a sense, well, based on this height, what zoning matches it? Is that zoning on the books? Is this something that has to be somewhat modified? For example, the industrial area, might it fit into some new zones that were talked about for North Brooklyn? And therefore it's not custom, but it's not something you have today. So getting a sense of what heights people are comfortable with on the east-west streets and the north-south streets, how much retail, how much office. So some of that could start lead to visuals. You know, what can be done in-house by city planning to show what streets may look like, or can we take cut and paste images of other buildings that are the heights of these opportunities, showing which sites might change based on how much zoning change. You know, these are exercises that can happen over many months to help inform people, right? So in addition to learning about where you might be able to figure out squeezing out more park space or affordable housing beyond MIH, that could be an area where city planning is much more key than its sister agencies.
That's good. Any comments on that, folks? Well, this has been very helpful. And I apologize to Crown Heights North board members for not preparing them or asking them for comments in advance. But I hope that this can be examined as we go over the next couple of months and bring it forward, because the study area is going to be affected by what's around it. And I hope we can revisit that in October. We have some time to take a look at it. Is there something else we need to cover tonight? You can unmute yourselves and answer. Ms. Young, Tasha Young, you have anything we should be preparing for October? Can you unmute yourself? Hello? Tasha, you want to do any closing statements?
I apologize. No, I'm good.
Okay. Does anybody want to make a closing comment? Peter, dare I ask you? Are you still there?
I'm here, but I think we've all had a long meeting.
Okay. So unless there's anything else, I thank you all for coming. And we'll reconvene in October, first Thursday, whatever that date is, unless we have an LPC item which would take precedent, and we can revisit this discussion. In between now and then, I hope you will all look at the suggestions that DCP has made. Winston's been very, very instructional in helping us understand what they need to do what we're asking them to do. So we have to team up and be prepared to give them the information that they've been asking us for. So unless there's anything else, I'll say good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night and
Everyone.
thank you.
Good night.
All right. Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.